recording. Okay, so the first visual element we are going to see is line. A line is a path traced by a moving point. So there are three primary functions of line in art. First function is to record the borders of form. And the second function is to describe surfaces and shapes. And the third function is to convey direction and motion. So let's see how it works. Okay. 1 second. Someone is coming in. Oops. All right. And there are two types of line in art. The first one is contour line, which is the perceived line that marks the borders of an object in space. And the second one is outline. So, which is the edge of a shape or figure depicted by an actual line drawn or painted on the surface. So let me show you how they are different in visual images. So the left one is contour line and the right one is outline. What's the difference?
One is blurry, the other one a little bit lighter, clearer.
Yeah. Yeah. Why the left one looks blurry?
Because you don't see the line.
That's right. That's right. So the contour line means, you know, there is no defined line like the outline on the right side. However, we can recognize, oh, there is a circle. So that is contour line. So without the defined line, by shading or color, so we can see the physical object, then we can call it a contour line. And there is an implied lines, which are similar with contour line. So an implied line is defined as a line that suggests the edge of an object or a plane within an object. The line may be broken by intermittent marks. It may be defined by value, color, or texture, or it may not be visible at all. With any implied line, our brain interprets that the line must exist. So that is a powerful tool that any artist can use. So let's see the example. So it looks very similar with the circle example, right? So the left drawing has defined the line following the, excuse me, apple's outline. However, there is no defined line on the right apple drawing. However, our eyes can imagine the outline of the apple on the right one because of the chiaroscuro, which is a value mass drawing that calls implied line. And here's another example of implied lines. On the left drawing, there is a defined line there is no defined line for the road, right? Like this. However, we can imagine there is a road by the vertical lines surrounding the road, right? And also, let's look at the right image. So this is a feather drawing with dots. There are any lines in this feather drawing. However, the dots spread in the feather's shape, so we can imagine there is a feather. So that's implied line. And now let's see direction and movement by lines. So the direction of a line can convey mood. So the first one is horizontal line. So horizontal lines are calm and quiet in art. And the next is vertical line. So vertical lines suggest more of a potential for movement in line. And the last one is a diagonal line. The diagonal lines strongly suggest movement and give more a feeling of vitality to a picture. So let me show you an example. So this is Peter Paul Rubens' oil painting, The Raising of the Crows. This is a Baroque style painting in 17th century. So the Baroque arts movement arose after the Renaissance during the age of colonial settlement. And the Baroque art features shows motion, emotion, turbulence, grandeur, and contrast. So can you guess which direction of line we can find in this painting?
Vertical?
Vertical? Yeah, probably, yeah, there is a vertical, but you know, that's not the main line of this painting. It looks very dynamic, you know.
Is it defined lines?
No. So can you choose one of these? So horizontal, vertical, and diagonal.
Diagonal.
Diagonal, because it shows a strong movement like this. Like this. So, so this painting shows the diagonal lines to show the strong movement. All right, so now we are going to see the second visual element, shape and mass. So a shape is a two-dimensional form and a mass is a three-dimensional form. So a shape consists of width and height. Each shape within the image occupies an area with identifiable boundaries. And boundaries may be created by line. And a mass. A mass is a three-dimensional form that occupies a volume of space. It consists of width, height, and depth. And shapes can be classified into two types, geometrical and organic shapes. Geometrical shapes are composed of regular lines and curves. However, like this, organic shapes are made up of unpredictable, irregular lines that suggest the natural world. And in art, we can divide an image as positive shapes and negative shapes to make contrast. So the positive shapes are the shape of the actual object, and the negative shapes are the spaces in between objects, which means the background. And sometimes it calls as figure and ground. So figure is the object part like a positive shapes, and the ground means background like the negative shapes. Like line, there is an implied shape in art. An implied shape is a shape that does not physically exist, but it is suggested through the psychological connection of dots, lines, areas, or their edges. So let me show you an example. So which shape can you see in the center of this image?
Triangle.
Yes, definitely triangle, right. So there was not physical triangle shape in this image, but you could recognize it by psychological connection of the edges. That calls implied shapes. Okay, so here is a quiz. So this is Raphael's painting, the Madonnas of the Meadow. So which implied shape can you find in this painting?
Maybe a triangle?
Oh, yes. There we go. Yes, it's a triangle. Yeah. So this painting has the implied shape. So let's move on. The third visual element we are going to see is light. So, excuse me. Light is represented in works of two-dimensional arts to define and describe figures and spaces. By using light, we can make space and three-dimensional mass on the two-dimensional surface. Like other elements we learned, light has implied light. So implied light means modeling mass in two-dimensional. Artists use light and shadow to model objects in two-dimensional works, meaning to give them a three-dimensional appearance. And this is a value scale. So value is defined as the relative lightness or darkness of a color. And it is an important tool for the designer and artist in the way that it defines form and creates spatial illusions. The contrast of value separates objects in space, while gradation of value suggests mass and contour of a contiguous surface. So this is an example to show implied light modeling mass drawing by Leonardo da Vinci from the Renaissance. So there is no defined line on the figures, but you can feel there is a light in this drawing. So this technique calls chiaroscuro, that means light and dark. It is discovered in perfection by Italian painter during the Renaissance. So with the chiaroscuro, artists employ value light and darks to record consists of light and shadow in the natural world. Contrast that model mass for our eyes. So one of the great masters of chiaroscuro was Leonardo da Vinci. For doing modeling mass, we can use these kind of drawing skills, hatching with a single direction, drawing lines, or cross hatching with multiple direction, drawing lines, or stippling with dots drawing. And sometimes we can make modeling mass with smudge technique. And now we are going to see the fourth visual element in art, texture and pattern. So these are actual texture. So actual texture is, literally tactile, a quality we can experience through touch. And there is a visual texture. Visual texture refers to an implied sense of texture that the artist creates through the use of various artist elements such as line, shading, and color. So let me show you an example. So this is a painting. However, with the artist's excellent painting technique, we can feel the texture of the image. So the wood wall on the background and the little stuff on the shelf, everything looks very realistic. And pattern. So pattern is any decorative repetitive motif or design and abstract ideas. As such, the elements of a pattern repeat in a predictable manner. A geometric pattern is a kind of pattern formed of geometric shapes and typically repeated like a wallpaper design. And the fifth visual element is space. Sculpture, architecture, and all other forms with mass exist in three-dimensional space. That is the actual space in which our bodies also stand. So these works of art take their character from the ways in which they curve out volumes of space within around them. So, and the artist like a sculpture and an architect draw a picture plan with implied space before they create actual piece of art. So we can make implied space with the linear perspective technique on the two-dimensional surface. Leonardo da Vinci from the Renaissance discovered this technique to show a space on the two-dimensional surface. The left one is one point linear perspective with the vanishing point on the center of the implied space. And this is a good perspective technique for compacting many objects in a limited space. And this is the second element of the Renaissance perspective technique. With foreshortening, artists can make the implied space more dynamic. So foreshortening is a technique used in perspective to create the illusion of an object receding strongly into the distance or background. The illusion is created by the object appearing shorter than it is in reality, making it seem compressed. So it is an excellent way to maximize the depth and dimension of paintings and drawings. And the third and the last perspective technique by the Renaissance is atmospheric perspective. It indicates that as an object recedes into the distance relative to the viewer, we see that object with recede clarity, value, and color saturation. Okay, so we're gonna continue to see the rest of the visual elements next week. And we have discussion today. Okay, so everyone, please go to Moodle Room and then on week 2. And there's today's discussion here, discussion 2.2 by tonight. So this is today's topic. So this is Francisco, I'm sorry, this is a fresco painting by Raphael, who is one of the master of the Renaissance, the School of Athens. And many Renaissance artists discovered the developed diverse technique to show three-dimensional appearances on the two-dimensional surface. So which technique did Raphael use to create a space in this painting? Write the technique and tell us why you think he used that techniques for this painting. And we just learned 5 visual elements, right? And you can find the answer in the 5 visual elements we just learned. All right. So please post it by tonight, and by tomorrow, please reply to your peers posting.